Well, good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Point of Care Diagnostics, Best Practices for Bringing Novel Solutions to Market. My name is Ryan Muse, and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using the same chat panel. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Verinex, who developed the content for this presentation. With a fully integrated concept to commercialization solution, Verenex's design and engineering expertise sets them apart, providing you with visibility to development, feasibility, and opportunity along the way. Their expertise improves launch readiness and expedites the development of technology for regulatory and commercial success. They are ISO 13485 certified and FDA registered for medical technology product development, and with more than 30 years of experience and a global reach into emerging markets, their design and engineering specialization makes the MedTech visions a reality. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's event. Brandon Bogdalek has worked with dozens of medical device, drug delivery, diagnostics, and digital health companies on outsourced innovation and commercialization projects. In his current position, he represents the product development and engineering PDE function from a marketing lens, helping to tell stories from internal and external subject matter experts that provide value and promote new thinking. He holds a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Minnesota. So now, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand the mic over to Brandon to moderate today's panelist discussion.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everybody for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us for this conversation. As Ryan mentioned, this is supposed to be an interactive webinar, so please feel free to take the time to use the chat function and send along as many questions as you guys have to the panelists. We have a great group and a great lineup today. And a lot of knowledge, and so we hope that you take advantage of the opportunity to get your questions answered. Before we go ahead and get the webinar started today, I'm going to go through just a quick round of introductions. So starting with Jacob Trevino. Jacob Trevino is a PhD, and he is the CEO of Chameleon, a startup company focused on next generation diagnostics. He also holds an adjunct associate professorship at Columbia University in the Department of Electrical Engineering, and leads Nanotech NYC, which is an organization fostering nanotechnology and growth. I've had the opportunity to get to know Jacob over the last couple months. He is a wonderful leader and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to chemistry and diagnostics. So Jacob, we're very happy to have you here. Next, I would like to introduce Joao Fonseca. With 15 years experience in the diagnostics field, Joao is skilled in developing and launching point of care products. Before joining Informatics, he founded and led BioSurfit, managing R&D teams across various diagnostics domains. Joao holds a PhD in physics from the University of Louis Pasteur of Strasbourg. Next, I would like to introduce Sarah Abalde-Sala. She's the co-founder and CEO of Ruby Nanomed. Dr. Sarah Abalde-Sala has raised over €5 million for the startup company, and she has participated in international startup programs and won numerous academic awards. Sarah has also secured over €6 million in international and European funding for research projects. Again, we have a wonderful lineup today. Thank you all for being here. And now, Ryan, I think I'd like to get the webinar started with a quick poll. The reason we're asking you guys this question is we are very interested in hearing what you're most interested about today. We have questions prepared on the topics of fundraising, product development, resourcing, and certainly there's some of you who are interested in all of these topics. I'm sure that's why you're here. But if you could take a quick moment and either highlight one specific area that you're most interested in, or all of the above, that will help us kind of facilitate the conversation in a way today that is most valuable. So with that said, we'll give you guys about 30-ish seconds here to get that answered, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, Ryan, I think we're probably good. All right, so product development seems to be the emphasis today, which is great, and then all of the above. So I think we'll continue moving forward with the questions that we have prepared. I think we'll cover all of these topics for you guys today, and we hope it's valuable. All right, so to go ahead and get us started, I'm going to have each of our panelists just give a little bit more of an in-depth introduction on themselves. And so without further ado, Jacob, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Brandon. And thank you and thank Veranex and everyone involved for bringing us together today. I think the panel is going to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of the other panelists as well. My background, as mentioned, I have a PhD in materials science engineering from Boston University. My specialties are sort of split between nanofabrication, nanophotonics, and sensing in general. I spent sort of the first third of my career working in the MEMS industry, sort of in high volume manufacturing of sensors for various applications. More relevant to this panel, I then moved into nanofabrication, nanophotonics work, where I spent, I'd say, the second third of my career being the director of various nanofabrication facilities here in the East Coast at NYU and CUNY and University of Pennsylvania. And it was through that role that I started working a lot with the startup community, specifically with companies that were trying to develop new technologies who needed nanofabrication and nanophotonics expertise. And they would come to labs like the ones that I ran at UPenn and NYU to find that expertise in those facilities needed to make the devices. And so at the time I was doing more academic minded projects, started interacting with these companies and finding that they really had some gaps on their teams at times. In particular, one company that came from Boston, they were moving their company from Boston to New York City, where I currently am now. They had an interest in bringing me on board to help develop this diagnostic that I'm now sort of moving forward as a CEO at Chameleon. And so I left the academic realm and joined Chameleon and started off as a principal scientist developing technology. And so at Chameleon, what we've sort of created over the past few years is this new platform technology for instrument-free rapid point-of-care diagnostics. And so these are colorimetric sensors similar to what you find for an at-home COVID test or at-home pregnancy test, but using a completely new platform. So we kind of think of it as like lateral flow version 2.0 for those familiar with the technology. And so over time, I helped develop this technology and moved into the CEO role when we started making some actual traction with the technology, and we needed to really go after things like funding and grants. And so came on board as CEO. Where we are as a company right now, we're developing our first product as we speak. We are focusing on cerebral spinal fluid leak detection using our platform. So these are situations where you come in with, say, a traumatic brain injury into the emergency room. Current standard of care is to take a sample and send it out to a lab for testing. Results can take for anywhere from hours to days to get results back, in which case that's very bad, right? You're sitting there with your brain leaking cerebral spinal fluid, and you can rapidly develop meningitis if it's not diagnosed quickly. So our sensor would provide a colorimetric readout within minutes, 25 minutes and under, and costs about 10 times less than the current lab-based competitor tests. And so that's where we are now. We've successfully received multiple NSF and NIH SBIRs. We've raised about $5 million to date in seed funding. We're currently getting ready for clinical trials in the next year or so. And we're, as a theme with any startup company, we're constantly raising money, and we're doing a round right now. So I'll stop there and we can discuss more as we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. You have great background, and you know, if you guys are listening, not only has Jacob is he the CEO of a company, but he's an adjunct professor at Columbia, and he started a diagnostics community out of New York City. I mean, he's just incredible. So very lucky to have him on the panel. Sarah, how about you get us started next?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much to Veranex. I feel humbled to be in this group of panelists, so inspired now to know a bit more about Jacob, because we just briefly touched upon his background in a previous very small session. So I'm delighted to be here. I am a chemist by background, so I have a bachelor in chemistry, and then I did my PhD in nanotechnology in Spain. And that was for nanosensors using photonics and plasmonic materials to do not only diagnostics, but also detection of many different things like water contaminants, allergens, and so on. But some of these proof of concepts were staying like a bit too fundamental for me, because I always wanted to be a medical doctor. Didn't happen for several different reasons. So since my PhD, I was sort of pursuing how to contribute to the clinical community with my knowledge. And then I moved to the University of Cambridge for a postdoc. And there I started learning about microfluidics, these amazing platforms, which actually originate mostly at a clean room facility, at a nanofabrication facility. So very much related to Jacob. And I was amazed of what these microfluidic platforms could do in terms of miniaturization, automation, sample reagent consumption, and so on. And that was applied to single cell detection during my stay and my work in Cambridge. And so after that, I was pursuing something a bit more applied in translational medicine. And so I moved to Portugal, the north of Portugal, which is a nanotechnology international research center. And when I got here, the CEO of Ruby Nanomed, which is the company I am a CDO of, she was just literally starting to think about creating a company. And so we're both Spanish, and in Spain and Portugal, in the south of Europe, we are not so much exposed to entrepreneurship in our education in a bachelor, right? But during my stay in Cambridge, I was exposed to it. Like my supervisor was a serial entrepreneur, and I was very much inspired about the things that he was doing. And so I took some innovation acceleration courses in Cambridge. And so when I got here, Lorena, the CEO, asked me, "Hey, Sarah, do you know a little bit about this?" Like, honestly, very little, but a bit more than her at the time. So why don't you help me? Why don't we join forces and we do this? And so since then, we incorporated Ruby Nanomed. That is a company that is devoted to develop products for the non-invasive monitoring of cancer progression. And just as Jacob, we're, as we speak, developing our first product for our first indication of use in breast cancer for monitoring metastasis progression, and also to give a therapeutic indication to the doctors. And we're also hoping very much to start clinical trials in the first quarter of 2024. So I guess that summarizes a bit why I am here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing a little bit about your background, and what you guys are doing at Ruby Nanomed is fantastic. So I encourage everybody to do a Google search and learn just a little bit more about that. Joao, last but not least, why don't you share just a little bit about your background?
Okay, thanks. So I'm a physics engineering. Did my PhD in France in physics engineering also. I've been always inspired by advances on science and trying to find applications. So I founded my first company, Biosurfit, after going to the doctor with my oldest son. So we had an infection. I was doing research at the time and developing some nice detection technology, but had no application. Then I went to the doctor with my son. We waited 2 days for a blood test results, and I thought I could solve that problem. So that was kind of the start of a big adventure with Biosurfit, where we basically developed a full set of platform technologies using centrifugal microfluidics, different detection modalities, ended up raising about 60 million, developed a portfolio of patents, 31 patent families, and then, you know, as a CEO and leader of this company that ended up having like 60 people and selling, I think we sold several million cartridges already around Europe. So it's kind of a I'm very proud of that part of my journey, where we focus on point of care. And in fact, the products the company is selling now are the ones that my son had to do at the time. Now they take like a few minutes, which is great. But you know, I've come from the technical background. It's what I like to do. So at a certain point in 2018, 2019, I thought I should, you know, go back to another challenging adventure. So while continuing to be chairman of Biosurfit, I've tried to find, you know, different alternatives for new projects. And I found that with informatics that I joined in 2020 as chief technology officer, where we are trying to tackle these sepsis diagnostic problems, which is a major problem in healthcare, and where we combine, you know, molecular diagnostics with machine learning to do diagnostics in less than an hour for a type of infections and severity of infections. So it's been like a big adventure where I split my time between California and Lisbon, and we have like an amazing team combining these different modalities. So it's exciting times. We are about to do design freeze and expect to launch the product in the US next year, and quite proud of what's happening. So that's a brief summary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you again. And thank you to all the panelists for the background on your experiences, and what you guys are doing at Informatics is also very exciting. So we're very happy to have you here on the panel. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit out of introductions, and we're going to talk just a little bit about fundraising. So anybody who is trying to raise money right now, is a growth stage company, is obviously dealing with some interesting macroeconomic conditions, right? It's just the reality of our world. And so, you know, I spend a lot of time with growth stage companies. I hear CEOs and CTOs and CFOs talk about it all the time. And so, you know, for the panelists that we have in the room here, and maybe starting with Jacob, and then we'll kind of work our way around the horn, what advice would you have for organizations who are trying to fundraise in this macroeconomic environment? I know you guys were once considering a big raise, you're going a little bit smaller. Maybe tell us a little bit about that strategy, and if you think it's applicable to other organizations.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's an interesting time. I mean, COVID really threw everything, you know, bunched up everything, and kind of everything's reset in a different way. Things are slowly moving back to where they were before COVID, but certainly it's a different environment raising money right now, in particular for diagnostics. There was, we've been told by several, you know, potential investors, as we've been talking to them about, you know, before COVID, we would have easily raised quite a large amount of money. Post-COVID, the bar has been raised, right? So they want to de-risk now because a lot of people got burnt investing in new diagnostics technologies and weren't really ready. So it is a different story now, but there's still opportunities. It just takes a little more work, takes, you know, more calls, more talk, more pitches. But for us, I mean, one thing that's been surprising to me is how, and you hear about it a lot, but it really makes a big difference, is your network. I thought it was just mostly going to be, you know, a bunch of research creates this gigantic list of potential investors who specifically invest in your area and specifically invest in the range that you're looking. But honestly, every connection that has led to something positive for us when it comes to raising has been a connection that was an introduction through someone in a network. And that could be a network through, you know, friends and colleagues who work in this space as well, or more relevant to us recently has been a program that Brandon and I, you know, we're part of as well, is called Bullpen Ventures. And so this is like a really interesting group of people that just come together to sort of share information similar to what we're doing here, but on a larger scale and a little more organized. But finding people who have spoken to someone in the past who are in the space that you're in to give you either a warm introduction or even just to make a suggestion, like, hey, go talk to this person. I know for a fact that they were looking for point of care diagnostics this time last year. Those kinds of things make a big difference, and they've really helped us a lot. I'll stop there just because I don't want to take up too much time, but there's certainly a million other things that you want to do.
No, thank you. And Sarah, are you having a similar experience right now? Just tell us a little bit about your fundraising journey.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I agree with all that Jacob said. So we've raised, so we started in 2018 and we were focused on raising money, and we went to public money first. So just we would avoid dilution in the first stages. And because we started talking to investors early and to potential partnered companies, corporate companies that could develop the product with us together, or that they would be interested, you know, in co-developing. And the answers we got, it was this this increased difficulty that Jake was mentioning. So before COVID, there was the Theranos effect, unfortunately. So you would have to have a much higher proof of concept with many more number of samples than before, you know. So if before you would raise, I don't know, like from 2 to 5 million with 30 samples and a robust technology, now you would need from 100 to 150 samples, like clinical samples, I mean, to be able to raise those very same numbers. That was pre-COVID. Then effect COVID, Jacob already spoke about it. And so what we found is that we had, you know, proof of concept for like between 30 to 50 clinical samples, quite robust comparison with head-to-head comparison with competing technologies, super robust, like 8 times better. But this was still not enough for investors to really jump in the chair and being so excited. And so we focused on raising this public money to build up on the credibility of the technology with a higher number of samples at the same time by developing the product further. And so we launched our first fundraising series like a year and a half ago, I would say. We went through ups and downs. We talked a lot with many investors. We've learned that Jacob said, but I'm going to specify it for beginners, as I am still almost a beginner, that it's important to talk to specific investors in your field. I think that's very important, because at the beginning we were a bit like, you know, talking to everybody that we were introduced to, which is fine. But when it is like a very broad fund and you're a very small startup with not much, you know, pre-seed or seed funding, it makes things much more complicated. So people that are in the diagnostics field are going to understand you and your business plan and your future revenues to come in 3 to 5 years much better. So I think that's the thing. Then the final thing that I want to share is that so we have so our goal was to raise this 2 million to complement this public funding by past June, and we had a deal that was almost closed and good. We were not convinced, you know, with the investors and with the conditions of the investors. We have 3 co-founders. The team is now like 8 to 10 people. We have some very good business advisors, but our gut feeling told us, no, this is not correct. These conditions are abusive. They're very aggressive. But we were running out of cash, you know. So what my last advice would be, like, if you have the slightest chance or alternative. So we were looking for alternatives. We were talking to our network. in a matter of a week, we were introduced to many other investors and funds. Eventually, we managed to secure the funding through not an equity round, but through a SAFE. You have options, you have SAFEs, you have convertible loans. If you're not ready, if you think that the valuation for your company is going to in the next year increase a lot, so don't rush into it, and you often have alternatives if you're not convinced, because if you sign off with some investors that you're not convinced, then that's like I guess it's like a marriage. I'm not married, but I guess it is like one. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that, and thank you for that. One thing that you said that really stuck out to me is this idea of the Theranos effect, right? And kind of what it has done to the diagnostics industry in general, which is just the level of scrutiny on data, right? And being able to present that as far as funding. And so you have COVID compounded with that. It just makes that environment that much more difficult to fundraise in. Joao, tell us a little bit about your experience. I know Informatics has been very successful, and you guys are doing a lot of amazing things. I'd love to hear your perspective on fundraising.
Yeah, so fundraising is tough, right? I mean, one of my friends always says that you don't look for money when you need it, you look for money when you can, which basically every time. So it's a tough one. I think the people coming from the technical side, as myself, have a certain tendency to fall in love with their own, technology and their own technical thing as being, the most important thing. And in reality, for an investor, it's really where's the money coming from? And I think fortunately for Informatics, we are targeting a business that is important in terms of margins, and I think that in a way helps. But also, it's a spin-off from Stanford, which has a lot of credibility. The founder and CEO team has also established a very strong track record on the scientific level. So I think that really that part also helps a lot. So we are fortunate. We raised a lot of money, but we also, it's a very expensive venture. So to reach where we want, changing the world, it's not cheap. So we really need a lot of investment. So I mean, my only recommendation is really not to give up and trying to find ways. If it's not going in the path one, just try path two, and so on.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm I'm pulling out the comment you made about having a strong leadership team, and what investors really want to lean into, right? Is your leadership team's all got a strong technical background, perhaps a track record of building successful companies in the past, and so perhaps that is it's most likely a strong reason why those organizations and investors are interested, in addition to all the amazing technology that you guys have. So, all right, let's pivot just a little bit. After we raise, right, the work doesn't stop there. Actually, I'd say the work starts there, and just jumping into commercialization, right? And there's so many different things that you need to do from a commercial perspective, right? It's getting the science right, getting the data right, and then it's as we've been talking, Jacob, it's the commercial packaging of your solution and actually bringing that to market. And so I'd ask this group here, all of which have gone through some level of commercialization, what some of the challenges that you guys have faced, or maybe let's pick one challenge that you faced and how you might recommend mitigating that challenge and getting ahead of it for those in the audience here who are thinking about starting their own ventures or part of their own ventures and commercializing. So Sarah, how about we start with you?
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, to me, at least, I would say that the biggest challenge that we have been realizing that we faced in the dark it was the potential disconnection between product development and regulation, right? So you can have the greatest team of engineers working on your product, but if, you know, and they might have the greatest solution to make your product as you want or as you envision, but then if that is disconnected to regulation standards so that you can reach certification, then there's no commercialization. And so I think that might be something that can put you back in your business plan and commercialization a year to a year and a half, depending on the field, of course, depending on the class of the certification that you're pursuing. And then I think that this has been an important one to us that we have realized during product development. And then the other one that I might highlight is then the distribution and logistics. And to us, this is still, you know, a bit large because we've sold hundreds of units, not thousands or millions. So I'm sure that Joao or Jacob can be much more enlightening than I. But you get all sorts of different distribution offers, as well as co-partnering offers for distribution that might not be fair and might take a big chunk on your margin. So I'll leave it there because I'm sure that Jacob and John have much more to share than I on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Joao, let's go to you. What are your thoughts on some of those commercialization challenges?
So first on the technical side, I think my experience has been like, you know, we have these nice labs where, you know, when we test like user experience, you know, we have people that have experience, we have an environment where there's no stress on patients, and we have, you know, super good light and so on. Then when we go to the field, you know, stuff is quite different. So my important lesson I got on this is really, you know, try to go and evaluate as soon as possible on a real scenario, real life scenario. I had to adjust some things on the product after, you know, first year of market launch because of this user experience, because we were in reality developing something for a different environment, and I think that's really important, especially for point of care solutions. Then, of course, you know, there's all sorts of challenges related to this aspect of how do you make a deal, and how you know, you have to count for that part of margins for distributors and so on. That complicates the business, but it's part of the game. I mean, I would recommend to do deals with distributors that consider this as important. So I would say not go to a partner that puts you on a list where it's a bit irrelevant if your product is a success or not. So you want partners that have a skin in the game and that are really encouraged and motivated to make it as a success. So that's another lesson I've learned, and many others, but I think that summarizes it briefly now.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question on that. And you mentioned the idea of getting your product in front of users, right? And doing some level of user testing and usability testing. How would you recommend doing that? Are you engaging your board and getting introductions to different groups and physicians to find patients? Are you going out and doing that on your own? Like, for somebody who is in the process of, you know, bringing a new technology to market, how would you advise them on going through that process of user testing?
I would say, you know, find some early adopters that are willing to, you know, to be more patient in the beginning, and explore that. I mean, the interface between the user and the device, either a cartridge or instrument, the way that the sample is introduced to that, and the way the user interacts are really the key aspects. And you can have a wonderful detection technology, a wonderful analytical performance, and then everything will fail because, you know, the user doesn't put the sample with the right volume, the right time, or just, you know, it's too difficult to do it with unskilled person and so on. So I think, you know, as I was saying, when I started, I first launched my product in the Netherlands. We did a good deal in the Eindhoven region, and we had systems, you know, a few hundred systems there. And when we passed to, you know, from the initial few to more, we started to have lots of problems related to this sample insertion, for example. And then we realized it was like, you know, it was the fact that the operators were having, you know, very different conditions of what we had thought in the beginning, you know. And so what we did then was interesting. We just we managed to do some focus groups with nurses, and we were asking them for, you know, feedback. Then we came up with like 3 or 4 alternative solutions. In that case, was really about this sample insertion, blood insertion to the cartridge, and we presented them with a few options, and we were trying to get feedback, and we ended up adopting one of the options that was considered preferable by them, not really by our engineers in the beginning. Our engineers thought it was slightly different, but yeah, this kind of feedback is, I think, extremely important. It's not all about the technology and the performance, and these aspects of user interface are really critical.
Yeah, and even sometimes it's the seemingly easy things that you are like, oh, that won't be an issue, are the things that people end up stubbing their toe on. And so just going out and getting that feedback and working through those usability challenges with users, I think can be a great way to mitigate that. So Jacob, how about you? I mean, you guys are working on a point of care solution as well. What are some of the commercialization things that you're thinking about? Things that you've come up against and challenges? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo what was already said about sort of what I'd call like clinical adoption, and then on top of that, things like reimbursement, right? In the US in particular, reimbursement is such a big part of any medical device becoming successful, right? You can have the greatest thing in the world, but if there's not a path for it for reimbursement, then the medical community is not going to adopt it, unfortunately. And so convincing healthcare providers and payers to adopt and reimburse your diagnostic solution can be a challenge. So conducting that market research to understand sort of needs and preferences is important. I'll never forget the first time I had someone ask me if there was a CPT code that exists for our diagnostic, and I said, I don't know what a CPT code is. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And for the European folks, there's codes in the United States where you have to, you know, your whatever it is, your tool, your diagnostic has to sort of fit under this category in order to be reimbursed for it. And sometimes there's a path that's already existing. Other times you have to forge that. And if you're forging it, it's a much more difficult path to go down. And so as something that helped us immensely was we had an SBIR through the NIH, and they put us through this program that it's called C3I, I believe. And it's very similar to what they do at NSF with ICOR, if anyone's familiar with that. These are programs that the federal government runs where they sort of make you go out and talk to 100 different sort of key players, whether it's physicians, whether it's nurses, whether it's, you know, insurance companies, and they make you do 100 of these calls and interview them, and they help identify these sort of pitfall places that'll trip you up along the way in advance, right? And then it also gives you a go or no go. You can sort of decide, you know, is what I'm trying to develop, does it have a path forward? And so for us, it was an interesting experience because we have a platform technology that's very easily adaptable. So we can actually go after many different targets in different spaces. And so but we wanted to pick one that was, as a new company in a challenging environment to raise money, that had the easiest path, right? The path of least resistance to get the platform out there first. And so we looked for an application where there was a CPT code existing, where there was, you know, reimbursement path existing, where physicians and nurses were actually asking for a faster way to do this test, right? Versus us trying to shove something onto them they're not really asking for. And so that's actually how we settled on CSF in the end. It was actually the path of least resistance for us. And so I think doing that market research and talking to the actual people on the ground for the needs is really important before you go in, because we're, as scientists, you know, we read papers and we see, oh my gosh, my diagnostic will outperform these by a mile, but sometimes there's not actually a need for it, or it's not a big enough need that they're willing to change the way they're doing it already. So yeah, so that's market adaptation, clinical adaptation is a big one.
Yeah, well, it's thank you, and it's actually a great transition into our next question, which is around this idea of bringing in internal talent to help with some of these challenges, or bringing in external talent, right? And what you guys have heard from the panelists, and all of which are, you know, highly educated, have a lot of experience. They've gotten tripped up at some point in time, and you have to surround yourself with people who complement your skill sets and your knowledge. And again, you can do that in a couple different ways. One, you can bring it in-house, and you can have great team in-house, and then there are partners that you can go to, whether that be for distribution or for regulatory or for reimbursement, whatever services. And so what I'd like to ask, you know, the team here is, you know, which roles have you found to be most valuable to have in-house with you compared to the roles that are best suited out of house? And maybe Jacob, we'll start with you.
Sure. I guess I'm biased, but I think our core technology development is probably the most important to have in-house. Right? That's what your patents are going to be around. That's what people are paying for really in the end when investors come in. And is you have to have the core technology people to be solid. I don't. And when our code developed at the university, sometimes it gets hard if it's really sort of still tied to the university. That can complicate things. Like I like having everyone really at the company working on the technology. I'd say another one that's pretty critical internally is strategic business development. I think having at least one person on the team who has done it before, who, you know, can speak the language when speaking to investors. I think that's critical. Parts that for us that we've been able to sort of outsource that have been, I think, kept us lean. You know, when money is short, sometimes it's been helpful to just be able to bring in consultants as needed. I think regulatory is for us has been. I mean, we would love to have a person inside regulatory person, but we only need them periodically. And going into the FDA process now, we need that person, and so we might bring them on. But I think leading up to it, we've been working with consultants quite nicely. They can jump in and jump out as needed. They can give us the information we need to interface with the FDA. And then things like, I think, legal and marketing, you can also outsource pretty easily. They don't need to be internal. We're fortunate that one of our co-founders is an IP lawyer, so that's a huge financial savings. But I don't think that's necessarily like has to happen for a company. So.
Yeah, Sarah, how about you? What has worked for you guys at Ruby?
Yeah, I mean, I would subscribe everything again. So fortunately, in our case, the three co-founders, we cover all the science and technology because I'm a chemist, and we have a physicist, and we have a biologist expert in oncobiology. So that was great. But then when and we, you know, we had opportunities of learning a bit the language, but then as Jacob said, sometimes you know stumped with a word that you're like, what is this? I mean, it's sometimes more difficult than the name of a mutation or a protein. So you start feeling very uncomfortable. So it was very good when we brought up our business expert in diagnostics. So this person was in diagnostic companies, multinational, for more than 25 years. So he's Enrique, and that was very useful. So he walked us through first networking and introductions to investors, to companies that might be interested in diagnostics, in pharma, medical devices. So we've learned a lot from him. And then actually, now he's in the background because we believe that we can manage these things a bit ourselves now, like combining the talk about the technology and the science together with a bit more on the business. And when there are specific questions, we resort to him or to senior advisors. So that is very important. Then when we started having many different projects that would tackle different parts of the technology, so in our case, it is we have a consumable, we have a cartridge in which the consumable goes into having a reagent kit inside, and then we have the automated processing machine that then does an AI-based analysis of what we gather, and so there started being very important to really have some product development, strong expertise that we cannot fully cover ourselves. So we know the concepts, we know what we want. We've made all this market and user analysis, but the development of these very advanced products from a very strong team of engineers, not just 2, 3, or 4 that you can hire, and then you have to to put them to work together, and you have to sort of coach them, etc. That might take very long. So we have outsourced the strong sort of product development thing. And then what we have in house, and we believe it is crucial, it is 6 people that are in the lab, that are some of them PhDs, some of them technicians, that are able to do all the testing of the alpha, pre-beta, beta prototypes. And so they receive these different bits of the product before and after integration, and they do the hard testing, continuous systematic testing. Regulatory, we've found that it is very good to outsource up to now because of all these considerations that Jacob explained. And unfortunately, we do not have an IP lawyer here, so we've been spending a lot of money that we did not account before, in not only in IP, but also in negotiations with investors, in analyzing the SOP, the stock option plan of the company, in analyzing all sorts of legal documents. But it is worth the money. So you have to do it, because otherwise so when we didn't have them, they look at some of our legal documents now and they're like, oh my God, how did you do this? You have to. so I guess this has been for us up to that point.
Yeah, I'm seeing a theme across the answers here, which is the idea of keeping the core technology and science, close to you, right, in-house, and that knowledge in-house, and then being thoughtful about how do I complement what we have here with partners in order to bring us to commercialization. And so you're right. I mean, hiring a bench of engineers is expensive and time consuming. So perhaps there are more beneficial ways to approach that. So really appreciate your thoughts. Joelle, how about you? What has been the combination for your team in-house? I know you guys are a little bit larger, but I'd be curious earlier on what you found valuable to have in-house versus partners.
So certainly the core technical team needs to be, fully engaged and in the company, and in the different projects I've been, that's how I found the way to make things happen. Because, on developing a product, it's like I often think of this as you are going on a road, and sometimes you have these kind of big big rock in the middle of the road and you have to pass that. It's kind of a big technical challenge. And I think these are best solved with a team that is able to, wake up thinking about the problem and solutions for it, work on the day, and then sleep about this and fixing it quickly. But of course, if depends on the project, but if the project is a very complex one with many different aspects, you cannot, like in the beginning, gather everything. So counting on key suppliers, development partners is a way to go. But also, you have to be opportunistic and look at, what's happening around it. It's not really about, as I said the other day, not really about, making a perfect plan and stick to the plan. It's more about, reacting to what is happening. You may find an opportunity to hire, a key engineer that you would not be considering, or even a full team, as we did. We hired a full engineering team that were experts in one part of the process, because we had an opportunity. The bad days for some companies are good days for others. So these kinds of things, I think, are even maybe I'm being. People may think I'm exaggerating, but I think are more important than plans. Plans are nice, but I never saw a plan that was survived reality. So
yeah.
If I may,
so I
I
think you
mean,
have to have
Joao, that is a great sharing, because up to now, probably 90% of the people we have hired, they've been headhunted by us, because we knew them, we knew they were transitioning or without a job, and we knew they would be perfect, ideal to do what we needed to do. And actually, same like an optical engineer that we might probably need if we were seeing to the plans in a year time, but he's available now and we just made in an offer, and it's like, stay with us because we know you're good, we know you should stay with us. Same for an expert in a PhD in tissue engineering and biology. We knew her, we knew she was transitioning, and we said, come with us. And because she's got like great transversal skill set, not only as a scientist, but she's also interested in documentation, quality management, regulation as well. So she can interface with these subcontractors, which is also important, because if the core team, like co-founders or CEO, CTO, have to interface with all these, different programs ongoing with subcontractors, it's very difficult.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for adding that on. I think that's a really important point. Sometimes it's not going to go according to plan, and you kind of have to take things as they come. And especially when it comes to qualified candidates, we all know that those are pretty difficult to come by today, just considering the market. So we have about 7 minutes left, and we have one question left. So I'm going to serve this up to the panelists and just ask them to be a little bit thoughtful about the timing. It's about being a first-time founder and a chemistry or a science founder, right? We have different kinds of founders. We have business founders, we have science founders, but I find that oftentimes in the diagnostic space, new technologies are being brought to market by folks like yourself with similar backgrounds. And so I'd ask you, when you look at other organizations out there and the kinds of founders that make up those companies, what do you think are some of the advantages to being a science, based founder? What conversations have you had with investors that they were really excited about based on your background? And I hope that maybe this question gives those other people who come from a science background a little bit more confidence that they can bring a technology to market and find those different people and those co-founders who may have a little bit more of that commercial experience or learn it as a science founder. And so maybe Jacob, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, one thing I was shocked in when I became an entrepreneur was how much overlap there was between being a PhD student and running a company. It's like it's a startup company, especially a tech-based startup company. The ability to do more with less starts at a PhD program where you don't have all the resources in the world and you have to sort of be creative to come up with solutions. But I mean, when in talking to investors, more your question, I mean, I think there's certainly a level of credibility that's there if you come in with you know, a history of publications and technology development, at least at the academic level. Having the background leads to, I mean, there's like a sense of confidence, I feel like, that's given, that investors will have in you, and what you're pitching, versus someone who has no technical background saying they have this new technology. They're going to do a lot more digging than they would normally if you don't have a scientific background. I think it makes a big difference, at least we found, with strategic partners. So we had many discussions with a lot of the larger diagnostics companies out there, and they seem to be very open to having discussions when we show up with 2 PhDs, you know, in the first, even at point of contact, right? We pitched them our technology. They really understand sort of the potential of the technology, given that it's, you know, it's built on very hard science, and once you show that data, like, you can't really argue with it. And I think coming from scientists pitching that as well makes a difference. So we've had great success in that, better the success than one of our co-founders who's an MBA and goes to try to approach some of these diagnostics companies. They just sort of shun him off. Yeah. And I think also that's one more last thing is, this is sort of unrelated, but not specific to your question, but finding, if you're interested in strategic partnerships with like a larger company, you having a scientific background and connecting with a scientific person, say on LinkedIn, at that company who works in that space, is a nice path to get in. You can start a conversation with that person, create a champion internally, and then they will go and find the business development people if you can get them excited enough. And I think that's a nice added benefit of being a scientist, is being able to sort of pick off those people at a company and have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jacob. Joao, how about you? What are your thoughts on the science founders and maybe the leg up that they have, considering their background?
I mean, I don't think it's about, you know, what is better. It's what is possible. I mean, I don't believe, you know, and we talk about Theranos here. It's a great example. It's not like someone just dreamed of finding a solution without a technical background and is suddenly able to solve a big problem because it had an epiphany moment. You know, it's about hard work, technical and scientific approach, and you know, the best people to do that are the ones that have been trained for it. So it's not like, oh, it's better to go with the scientists versus a non-scientist. It's about, you know, solutions appear because knowledge advanced to a point of being cutting edge, and then somebody finds a good application for a big problem. So that's how it happens. So that's why I think, you know, either investors or corporate companies, they also know this. So it's how it is. This is how the game is played, basically.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, right? And at the end of the day, there's some sort of combination of skill set that's going to lend to being successful, whether you have it or your co-founder has it. I think it's well said. It's not about better. It's about, you know, what's possible. So I think that's really great insight. Sarah, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I think that we have many advantages, and so we're scientists. We know about the technology. Then we have to write papers. So we are writers, and we have to sell this paper. We have to sell a story to the editors of the scientific journals. In the same way, you have to sell a story to investors. Just adapted to a different audience. Then we're salespeople as well, because we have to sell that to collaborators. We have to again sell that story. Then we're also very good in procurement, because we have to compare different suppliers. My group of friends that are not scientists. So one is a lawyer, the other one works in procurement, the other one works in sales. But we do all these things already in our scientific work. So it's just bringing it to the next level with slightly different audiences, but at the end of the day, the skill set is the same. You go to a conference and you know, you called as an invited talk or a keynote if you're a great communicator, and if you can, again, you know, sell your story, sell your science. So again, when you go pitching out there, it's exactly the same. You get to publish in great journals if you're able to raise to put together a group of robust experiments and technology and demonstrations, which is what you need to commercialize something. So I think that these are many advantages, because we get to be very multitasking, not multitasking only, it is multi-topic, I would guess, or multi-job. So I think that these are the main advantages. Of course, always, you know, starting from the premise that you're a good communicator, you're a good scientist, you're a good, etc., etc. But I think that, you know, we have it almost all.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it's also the forced function of being an entrepreneur, right? Is needing to wear multiple hats, even though perhaps you don't want to put that hat on today, right? Some days you got to put on the salesperson hat or the procurement hat. And you know, as a founder or a leader inside of a small team, that's just a necessity. So I really appreciate that feedback. Well, I do know we're at the top of the hour here. It's 1:01 here Central Time, and I want to be thoughtful of everybody's time today. First thing I would like to do is just say thank you to the audience for taking an hour to listen to us today. And then, of course, thanking the panelists, all of which who have incredible backgrounds, incredible experiences, and took an hour out of their day today to share that with everybody. So massive round of applause to them. We didn't see any questions come through the chat today, which I'll take as a great sign. I hope we were able to answer all the questions that you guys had. But if you do have questions, please feel free to shoot them to any of the individuals that are on the screen here. Their emails are listed. So if there's specific questions you have for specific panelists, I know all of them are very open to responding to you and getting back to you in short order. So with that, I will again say thank you, and I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for that wonderful discussion. We have reached the end of our time here today. As you heard, if we couldn't get to any questions, though, from the audience, please note down any of the contact information you see on screen so you can reach out to our speakers for some further discussion. Also note that a survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated as it helps us to improve our webinars. Now, I've also sent you a link in the chat box. With this link, you'll be able to view the recording of this event on this page, and you can share this link with your colleagues so they may register for the recording and view it as well. Please join me once more then in thanking all of our speakers for their wonderful time here today. We hope everyone found the webinar informative. Have a great day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. You too.
Bye.